Okay, in this meditation we're going to be working with sounds. Feel free to put some music on if you like. You can work with music, it's a really good thing to work with. Or otherwise you can just use the sounds that are around you naturally. So let's get the posture right first of all. Regardless of how you're sitting, I want you to elongate the spine. And I want you to bring your attention into the face. Just make sure the face is nice and loose. You find this really helps with your attention. The eyes, the cheeks, the jaw. And now bring your shoulders down and just make sure your shoulders are nice and loose. You can even give them a wiggle. If you're sitting in a chair, just make sure your lower back is touching the chair, the rest of your back is away, and your weight is center forward rather than back into the chair. Regardless of your posture, look for symmetry in your arms and hands and keep everything nice and loose. I trust by now you've found a hand position that works for you. So once we've got the posture right, let's begin. What I'd like you to do is, when you notice a sound, that you're hearing a sound, I want you to bring that sound to the forefront of your attention and use the label hear mentally, or you can whisper it. And then you're pouring your attention into the sound and you're trying to detect things like the location, the movement, the type of sound that it is. And you stay with that for a few seconds. If there's a persistent sound, you can run cycles on it over and over again. If the sound disappears quickly, you can watch it disappearing and then sort of bask in the silence that's left. Silence is also something you can work with. So if you notice a lack of sound, it doesn't have to be a complete lack. If you notice just a certain area, say in front of you, behind you, where there's a lack of sound, there's silence, then bring the silence to the forefront, label it here, pour your attention into it. And that can be an entire practice in and of itself, working with silence. What you'll probably find is that you're commenting on the sounds. When you realise this is happening, just bring your attention back to the sounds themselves, or to the sound that you're holding in your attention. And by doing this, we're basically overcoming our tendency to, or we are developing a new ability to see sounds as they are, instead of just being able to categorize them and understand them, which is useful but also limiting. As we know, during meditation we're going to get distracted. The key is just to notice when your attention is elsewhere, when it's not on the sounds around you, just to gently bring it back. Every time you do this is every time that you're growing in your practice. If you notice your attention's wandering continually, just make sure you're using the labels, and you can even whisper the labels or the label here. And this just strengthen and direct your attention better. On the other hand, you might notice your attention is pretty stable, that you can move, you can stay with one sound for a few seconds, then move to another one, and you can repeat this and your attention isn't wandering too much. In that case, see it as an opportunity to go deeper, to discover more, to perhaps investigate sounds that you haven't worked with yet, or to work with silence. The last module we did was on thought, working with thought. What you might realise is that whenever you have a sound, you hear a sound, you can sort of picture the sound or things associated with it. Just notice this is happening, if you notice that it's happening, and try to just go into the raw experience of the sound. As I said, with our tendency to comment on sounds, our tendency to picture the source of the sound is useful, but it's also limiting. It means we're not often really hearing the sound as a sound. Just a little note if you're working with silence. Silence can be quite delicious, especially when you pay deep attention to it. If you notice that you're sort of commenting on it, saying this is great, this is amazing, I love the silence, etc. Just notice that's happening, and then just try and go deeper into the silence itself. Just direct your attention away from thinking. Go into the silence. And this applies to sounds as well, but silence can be particularly enjoyable, meaning we're liable to comment on it mentally. I also invite you to try and see that sounds, no matter how loud they are, what type of sound they are, where they're coming from, they're actually very substanceless and empty, and you can't really grasp them. You can sense them, but you can't hold on to them. They're very ethereal. But also, when you can see that, you also realize that they're very rich. And you might gain a sense of satisfaction from listening to them that you might not have experienced before. This is part of meditation, is changing how you perceive what's going on in the senses, and seeing that it's both emptier and richer than you may have noticed before. Sounds are definitely part of that. As I mentioned at the start, you can generate your own sounds with music, for example. I like to do that. Or you can just stick with what's going on around you right now. And just hearing in a new way the sounds that you've maybe been hearing for a long time. The wonderful thing about this practice is that it's very suited to doing it during daily life. Even when you're with friends, with family, watching the TV, watching a film, listening to music. We're always hearing sounds, but often our attention isn't as heightened as it could be. So I invite you to try this out whenever it seems to appeal to you. You'll notice it really brings you into the present. And it makes things richer and fuller and more interesting. As always, we want to have equanimity, which means non-resistance, letting things come and go as they want to. Equanimity here looks like letting sounds come and go, even if you naturally think of them as boring or uninteresting. If you want more sound, just trying to see through that tendency, just trying to let things be as they are. It also extends to things like what you're experiencing in the body and your mind. Even though that's not the object of focus in this meditation, we still need equanimity. Just opening up to absolutely everything we're experiencing as it is. When you do this, you notice your attention changes. It's something you have to try and sense for yourself. Notice that, if you remember the last module we did, this is essentially the same meditation we did with thinking, our auditory thoughts, sort of the internal noise, the internal sounds that we have. The difference, of course, is that we're much more attached to our thinking than we are to sounds around us. But essentially, the two practices are very similar. If you notice you have a deep attention with the sounds, the next level is to, just as an investigation, try to see that you are not observing the sounds are just happening. And there's no need for a you that is observing the sounds. Usually it feels like we are over here and the sound is over there, and we are looking at the sound, we're observing it, we're hearing it. Just try to see that, nice and gently, that isn't really the case. And that actually, when you pay close enough attention, it feels like you are the sound, as much as you are the body and the mind. Don't have to force this kind of attention. This is already the case. If you find it interesting, productive, then go for it. If not, just work with the sounds as we were before. But this is the long-term path. To realise there is no solid observer. Okay, we're into the last few moments, the last few minutes. Keep running those cycles. You might like to just gently stretch up through the spine and relax the rest of the body, just to take you through the last few minutes. Keep it going, last few moments. Okay, that's 30 minutes now. Good work. If you'd like to continue with this, please do. Otherwise, thanks for joining me.